We're going to go ahead and get started. How's everybody doing today? Long day at the show. It's 4 o'clock. I thank everybody for sticking around all day. It's been a long day for me here at the show. I got here about 8 o'clock this morning, so I know I'm ready to get out of here. So I appreciate everybody coming in to listen to what I have to say. I'm going to talk about menu prices today. Let me tell you a little bit about myself here first. Recovering pizzeria owner is what I always like to say. Spent about 25 years in the pizza business. I think it's actually about 26 or so now. Started when I was 24. I took over a failing pizzeria in my hometown. Doing about $2,000 a week in sales, and we built it up to about $1.1 million after about 5 or 6 years in a town of about 9,000 people. Went on to open 2 more, and so I had 3 pizzerias at one point. Sold all of them. They're all still doing really well. Founding member of the World Pizza Champions. You've probably seen that logo down there at the bottom of the screen on a lot of guys' jackets running around. It's a team of pizza guys that we put together way back in 2004 or so. We worked for Pizza Today and Pizza Expo to put on the World Pizza Games for them. So if you get a chance, check out the World Pizza Games competition, and make sure you go to the finals and party tomorrow night. That's upstairs, and it's free food and free drinks for everybody. 4-time world champion, 3-time U.S. champion. Used to do a lot of acrobatic competing. I'm too old to do that now. I get down on the floor to do dough tricks. I can't get back up very fast, so don't do that anymore. I've got my certification by the Italian School of Pizza in Neapolitan and Classic Italian. What I do now is I am president of PerfectingPizza.com. It's a resource for pizzeria owners, all kinds of videos, templates. If you're looking for an employee handbook, we've got one of those you can download and customize it. That's the kind of stuff we do to help people. And then also, I'm doing wood-fired mobile now. Just started that up, kind of a side hobby thing with me and my kids and my wife. And so that's a little bit about my history. And I want to share with you a little bit about how in the world to figure out where you should price your menu, why you should price your menu. And I'm going to try and draw from as many stories as I can. So I'm going to start with some photographs of my last pizzeria that I sold. It's called 600. Really kind of an elegant, upscale pizzeria. Get my buttons to work here. And that's probably really dim, isn't it? Hard to see, but 125 seats, full bar. We did mostly pizza. Beautiful decor. We've put a lot of money into it, made it really fancy, really nice. Okay. And the thing is, when it comes to menu pricing, and I'll kind of come back to, I'm going to go around the long way to why I even showed you this. But what price should what should your menu prices be? How in the heck do you figure out what your menu prices are? There's no easy way to answer that question. It's impossible to answer that question with a simple sentence. So I'm going to talk about it for an hour, give you guys a lot of ideas, a lot of theory, a lot of numbers to think about. But I had a really nice high-end restaurant in Ohio. Small town, 14,000 people was that one. We did about $1.2 million or so there out of that store 6 days a week. And I have a good friend named Tony Gimignani, which some of you have probably seen some of his seminars, you've read some of his stories, you know he is. Who's been to Pizza Rock? All right, so a lot of you guys have been to Pizza Rock. I like to think my restaurant's really nice, like Tony's. I've known Tony for decades. I knew him before he was famous. Tony and our pizzas are very similar. I use the same flour, I use the same sauce, I use the same cheese, I use the same pepperoni. We make them the same way. His pizza cost about the same as mine to make. But even though I've got a really nice, fancy pizzeria, I can't sell my pizzas for the same exact price he sells his. So my 16-inch pizza might be $15, or let's probably more like a large 16-inch. I think it was several years ago when I sold, it was probably about $13. Tony's is probably closer to $20. Okay. It's because, and if I tried to sell my pizza at $20, like he sells his, and don't quote me on that. If you go to Pizza Rock and go, I looked at the menu and he was wrong, he lied. I'm just kind of, it's an illustration. If I tried to sell my pizzas for 20 bucks, I would go out of business because nobody would buy them. And if Tony sold his pizzas for $13, he would go out of business because he couldn't cover his expenses. So there's no real easy answer, and there's a lot that goes into it to figure out where you should price your menu. You know, the average income where he's located, you know, I mean, San Francisco, where his one pizzeria is, if you make $100,000 a year, you're considered to be living in poverty. In Pizza Rock, or Las Vegas, where Pizza Rock is, you know, the average income is pretty high here. And where I'm at, the average income was about $40,000. So I had to make, even though I had this, what I thought was a beautiful place, we really wanted people to enjoy it, I had to set my prices that would match with my customer base. So one of the things that I have that's different than like Tony has is, you know, my fixed costs are a lot lower. So when you look at this, this is kind of, these are three elements, 3 in 1. That's kind of what I like, the three pieces of every single pizza shop, or really any business for that matter. You're going to have your profit, your fixed cost, and your prime cost. Okay? So when you want to figure out, you know, you want to figure out what does your menu prices need to be, first you got to figure out what do you want your profit to be. That's where you start. How much money do you want to make? That's, if anybody said on any of the other sessions I've done, I always start with that. How much money do I want to make? And that's how I figure out everything else. Everything I do with my business starts with that number. How much money do I want to make? Do I want to make $100,000 a year? Do I want to make $50,000 a year? Do I want to make $250,000 a year? That's where you start. So for me, and those are all percentages, I wanted to do a 20% profit. Okay, 20% profit, and I wanted to do $1 million in sales. So it was about $250,000 a year our pizzeria made in profit. Okay, now my fixed costs there, you see, my fixed costs are about 20%. You know, town of 14,000 people, I was paying $3,000 a month in rent for 3,500 square feet. My other pizzerias, I was paying $400 a month for 1,200 square feet. Other pizzeria, I had 2,000 square feet, and I was only paying about $360 a month in rent. And then I bought a building, renovated it, and my mortgage plus the renovations were only about $1,000 a month for a 2,000 square foot building with 2 floors and a parking lot. So everybody's fixed costs are so different. You know, everybody's are different. So for me, my fixed costs were only about 20%, give or take. All right, my prime costs were 60%, all right, food and labor. So when you take that a little bit more of a look at that, and then you break down the food and labor, right, at 28% food costs, give or take, 32% labor was mine. So I know I've got to make, my food cost has got to be 28%. So that number right there dictates my entire menu. All of my prices now revolve around that 28. Now, if I back up, okay, and I say I only want to make, you know, my particular instance, maybe my rent was, I couldn't get $3,000 a month. Maybe I had to pay $4,000 a month. Well, my fixed cost might be 21, 22%. So I've got to figure out where's that other 2% coming from. Am I going to give up some profit? Am I going to go down to 18%? Or am I going to squeeze a little on my prime costs? Am I going to pull my labor down? Or am I going to make my food costs lower? You know, and you can make your food costs lower, your food cost and your labor lower by one of two ways. You can reduce those costs just by not paying as much for food and by not paying as much in labor, not using as many people, or you can raise your prices. It has the same exact effect. So I would have to make up my mind. Where am I going to pull that from? You know, is it going to be here or there? So you've got to take the time to put together, you know, you put together financial projections, you put together a financial model, you just a piece of paper, you sketch out a P&L, and you're just like, here's my costs. You don't have to be, you know, you don't have to be really, you don't have to be an accountant to figure this out. You can do it with a pen and paper, a spreadsheet, or you can buy some fancy app or have your accountant do it for you. But just figure out, you know, you've got to look at your own business and say, all right, where am I at? What do I got here? Okay, I'm going to do, I need to be at 28% food. And this is a lot of times you have a realization, oh crap, man, my business really sucks. I've got way too many problems going on when you do this, and it leads to a lot of other things you can fix that'll help save you money. But At the end of the day, 28% food cost is where I need to be as a percentage of my sales. So you look like, this is an example more like, probably, I'm just guessing, this would be more of an example of like what my friend Tony has. He's probably not having, I bet Pizza Rock isn't $3,000 a month rent. So his fixed costs are going to be a lot higher. And maybe his profit is less. For this illustration, I'm saying, no, it's not. Maybe he says, I want 20%. But, so then he has different prime costs. So, his food and labor are different. He's got, in order to do what he wants to do, maybe his food cost has to be 20%. 20% in order to get 20% profit here, his food cost has to be lower. So that means his prices have to be higher, or his costs have to be lower on his food. More than likely, they're going to be higher prices. I know they're higher prices. So, got to know what that number is. Got to have that food cost number in mind. And that 28 is the one we're going to use as we kind of go through this illustration. So the next thing is going to kind of hold on to that 28 number. We're going to come back to it. So understand, there's no simple magic formula for figuring out what your menu prices are. There's just no real magic formula at all. I give you some generalities and things like that, give you the tools. Hopefully you go back and figure it out. What works for you. There's no magic formula. So the next thing you got to understand is, what are your price boundaries? I mean, we all have boundaries we have to stay within. You can't go outside those boundaries, or if you do go outside those boundaries, you might suffer some consequences, like people won't buy your pizza. So competitor pricing. The one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to rely on your competitor pricing to figure out what your prices need to be. And one of the biggest reasons is because your competitors may not have a clue what they're doing, and they may be going bankrupt. And if you try and match what they're doing, what are you going to happen to you too? You're going to go bankrupt too. So competitor pricing is just, you need to know your enemy. What are they doing? All right, what's my competitor doing? What are their prices? What ballpark are we in? Their pricing helps kind of set the stage of the area, especially if you're new. You're coming into an area, you're new to the area, you're like, okay, what's the playing field look like? The entire neighborhood thinks that a pizza needs to be between X amount of dollars, $10 to $12 for a large. Now I'm coming into the area, and if I need to be at $16 for a large to make that 20% profit, probably at a problem. I'm way outside the ballpark. I need to go back and revisit what I'm doing. So big thing is, it just helps you know what the boundaries are, and don't emulate or copy your competitors ever on their pricing. It's knowledge for you to use. It's a tool for you to understand where the boundaries are. So competitors, what else we got here? The food cost goals I just talked about. What is your food cost target? You have to have that number. That is a number that you absolutely have to have. Okay, and we'll talk about how to get that number here in a minute. Are you selling the right things on your menu to meet that goal? All right, so when I say that, I used to sell wings at all of my pizzerias. I used to sell wings. Had my sales rep come in, I don't know, how many years ago was I 24? 22 years ago. And convinced me that I should put the bakeable wings on my menu. Those, and everybody probably knows who I'm talking about. Great product, they taste great, they're easy to use, they're here at the show. Bakeable wings, they're already cooked, you just put them in through your oven, you don't need a fryer, they taste great, they're awesome. And I put them on my menu, and my customers love them. Well, over the years, the price kept going up, the price kept going up, price going up. And then pretty soon, I'm looking at my food costs, and I'm like at 40% food cost, 50% food cost, 60%, 70% food cost on these wings, because they are so expensive. And yet, some things have that inherent boundary built into them. Like, there's only so much people are willing to pay for things like wings and drinks, a beverage. You can't. It's a commodity. So I was scared to death. I'm like, man, gosh, we're selling so many wings. I'm scared to death if we take them off, people won't order my pizza. One day we just took the plunge and we took wings off the menu completely at all 3 restaurants. No more wings. We're done with it. I couldn't. But by the time we factored in labor and food, it was barely a break even, and nobody complained. I mean, we had some people go, "Oh my gosh, you got rid of wings. I wish you had wings." We don't have wings. And they say, okay, well, I'll just take a pizza and some garlic knots instead. And, the world didn't come crashing to a halt. So putting things on your menu that are really high, if you've got a food cost goal of 28%, but you load your menu up with jalapeno poppers that are 50% food cost and onion rings, bakeable onion rings, and all of these things that, pizzas that are really hard to make and expensive. And all of a sudden you're like, why can't I hit 28% food cost? Well, part of the reason is because everything on your menu is so expensive to make. So do you have the right things on your menu? And are your food costs low enough to meet your goal? Okay, sometimes, distributors out there aren't always as honest with you as they should be. Not all of them, some of them. I've been the victim of some gouging from distributors in the past. And if we're like a lot of people out there, a lot of operators, might have 2 or 3 different vendors you're splitting all your orders up from, and nobody will give you the best pricing. What I did is I went to one of my vendors and said, listen, I'm going to give you 100% of my business. What can you do? We wrote a contract, dropped our prices, and saved about $10,000, $12,000 instantly per year. So I brought my food costs down. So I was able to save some money there. Oops, wrong button. Help if I knew how to use a computer. All right, what's next? So profit goals. We talked a little bit about that. If you don't have a profit goal, you don't know what to aim for. You got to have a target to shoot for. Profit goal is everything, how much money you want to make. The more money you want to make, of course, the higher your prices need to be, or the lower your costs need to be, or the more volume you need to have. Okay, that all factors into it as well. And then commanding a higher price. So I'm guilty of this myself. Being an independent operator, you automatically assume you're kind of like, I'm independent, I'm a local business, I charge more. People will pay for quality. Sometimes you got to check yourself. You're like, is my pizza really that good? Is it really that good? I've learned a lot over the years. And I go back 20 some years ago when I first started, I thought I knew what I was doing. I thought my pizza was the best. But when I look back, I'm like, wow, man, I used some really crappy stuff. And I can't believe people stuck with us over the years. So making sure that your pizza, 1, is quality enough to command that price. 2, do you have the service that can back that up? So service-wise, are you one of those guys that are like, man, we're just so busy, deliveries take 45 minutes to an hour and a half on Saturday nights, and they just live with it? Well, you know what? The chains can do 30 minutes like that, no problem. Are you really, you're charging more for your product and your service sucks, and you kind of still expect people to pay more? You got to kind of double check yourself. People are willing to pay more if you can deliver on the price and you can deliver on the product and you can deliver on the service. You got to really make sure, double check yourself, take your ego and put it on a shelf and say, all right, I really need to dissect my service and I need to dissect my product and see if I really can ask my customers to give me more. Being local and independent, this what I just kind of mentioned. It's not licensed to charge more automatically. All right, so this next slide here. I don't know if you can read that. I'm sure you've all seen this. When you buy from a small business, you're not helping a CEO buy a 3rd vacation home. You're helping a little girl get dance lessons, a little boy get his team jersey, a mom put food on the table, and a dad pay a mortgage or a student pay for college. I've seen this over and over, and probably some of you guys have posted this on social media. Maybe you have this sign in your business, and I apologize if I offend you, but man, this just infuriates me when I see this. Because so many local businesses around me, and I'm sure around you too, they just automatically think because they're small, they're local, they're family owned, it's like, and it's licensed an excuse to just suck. All right? It's like, well, my kids, I needed to pick them up from school, so I just closed the business and I went and got them and took them home. You know what? And then the customers are trying to get in the door and you're not there. You know what? They're going to the chain down the street next time. It's because you failed at being a business owner. My son, we signed him up to take drumming lessons. Came highly recommended, local guy, really well known in the community, signed up for drumming lessons, went in to take him to his lesson, and they had screwed up the schedule and the owner was gone, and they're just like, well, sorry. No apology, no nothing. He's not here, he's doing something else. Okay, and then they really didn't try and do anything. Tried to do uniforms for employees, local lady that did embroidery. Every time I went to pick everything up from her, she always had a sign on the door, closed. It's Tuesday at 3 o'clock. I went to go pick up my uniforms. Hours on the door say 9 to 5. It's 3 o'clock, they're closed. I go the next day, they're closed. The next day, they're closed. Over and over and over again. And it's the businesses, if they, gosh, what do I want to say? Sometimes they just use this as an excuse to just kind of be bad. And it's like, you know what, if we're going to be small, we're going to be independent, we need to deliver. We need to show that we are better than the chains. I know we have families, I know we have things, we're struggling, it's tough. But if you want to be able to charge $13 for a large pepperoni versus $10 for a pepperoni like your competitors, you got to deliver on everything. You got to be hitting on all 8 cylinders all the time. So you know your boundaries, okay? Where do you start? So cost out every single thing on the menu to know its food cost. How many of you have costed everything on your menu? So it looks like about maybe a quarter of you guys. So everything, every sandwich, every salad, every pizza, every variation of pizza, every drink, every draft beer, every single thing on your menu, you painstakingly have got to figure out exactly how much it costs. Remember back when I started, it was DOS and Windows 3.1 was just getting popular and we still didn't have Google. So I'm in the back. I'd taken over this place. I'm working 27 hours a day. And at the end of the night, I've got all my invoices laid out in front of me, and I've got pen and paper, and I'm just writing it down. A case of cheese costs $30. There's 30 pounds in a case. It's $1 a pound, whatever it was, and I'm doing the math per ounce. And then the next night, I spend another hour doing that. All right, so pepperoni is this much, and then sauce is this much, and then my dough, I've got this much flour, I've got this much yeast, this much olive oil in it. That costs out this many pennies per ounce to make, and the next day, and I just keep on doing it until I figured out exactly what everything cost me down to the ounce, and then I picked apart everything on my menu, and I did it again. So every night it would do a little bit more. I'd be like, all right, so we're going to make a large pizza, and I'm going to figure out a way to portion out the sauce that goes on it. All right, so I used spoodles. Big fan of spoodles. So I had a spoodle. All right, large pizza gets 4 ounces of sauce. All right, so now I know 4 ounces of sauce on a large pizza, and it costs this much. All right, how much cheese goes on it? All right, well, obviously, in order for me to figure out how much cheese costs on a pizza, I've got to start either weighing it or putting it in a cup or something. So then portion control at my restaurants was born out of that, because I'm like, I've got to figure out, in order for me to figure out how much it costs, I've got to figure out how much is going into everything. So we did everything. It took weeks. It took weeks and weeks and hours and hours and hours. Now it's a lot easier. There's like my friend Big Dave, he hasn't been here at the Pizza Expo for a few years, but he was the very first seminar I went to, like way, way back in the day. And he's got a great piece of software called Food Cost Pro. If you're looking for something that'll help you do that, there's Food Cost Pro, there's spreadsheets, there's pen and paper. POSs do this now. My POS does this. So I put it all into my POS once and I was done. But one way or another, you need to know exactly how much everything costs, right? Because you don't know how to price it if you don't know how much it costs. So, oops. So we're back to this. This is now our food cost goal, 28%. So we got some examples here. So I get 28%, and obviously, not everything on our menus can be 28%. All right, so if you want to do a 20-ounce, or let's say we got a bottle of Aquafina or whatever, you're not selling this at 28% food cost. I mean, you can't sell a bottle of water for $4 unless you're in Las Vegas. So you're going to sell this for maybe $1.50, $2. So not everything can be marked up just to be 28%. So here's some examples. So here's a large pepperoni pizza. I've got everything out there. Pizza box is 50 cents, dough ball is 50 cents, sauce, cheese, pepperoni, blah, 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 $2.82. You see down there at the bottom, my food cost, 21.69% is the food cost on this. Okay, so I got that done. That's fitting within my model, 21%. Okay, garlic knots. All right, so I've got my dough ball, some garlic oil, a container, some dipping sauce, 13%. All right, so obviously garlic knots are only costing me 54 cents. I don't want to make those 28% food cost because I can get a lot more out of that. 13% food cost at $3.99. I need to push those things as far up as I can get them. You just don't want to say, 28% and then just mark it up to only $2 or whatever. So here it's important to know there are some traditionally accepted price ranges too. And this is important to know what your competitors are pricing things at. So if your entire town, your city, everybody's selling garlic knots for $6.99, well, what the heck? Charge $6.99 for them, and then get, maybe that drops down to, 8% food cost. So there's a lot of different things you can do. 20-ounce Coke. Here's that example, I said of the water. Can't sell that. It's going to cost me like $1.05 here in this scenario. $1.95 is what I'm selling it for. That's 53% food cost. Okay. And then here's a sandwich, chicken sandwich. Comes out to be 32.89%. So our menus are going to have all these different things: pizza, wings, sandwiches, garlic knots, appetizers, drinks, all these different things, and they're all floating around at all these different food costs. You're like, how do I then take that to fit into what I want it to be? All right. That's where you come into this little menu mix or menu matrix analysis here. And I've got business cards up here. If you come grab one, when I'm done, I will email you a spreadsheet that's interactive that you can plug all your things in that'll do this for you. So what you do is you sit down and you take your report out of your POS. You've figured out the cost of every single thing on your menu. You know what you're currently selling it at. Plug everything in here along with a monthly report of everything you sold, the number. So here in this rough scenario I put on here, we sold 10 8-ounce cheese pizzas, 25 pepperoni pizzas, blah, 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 all the way down. So this sales is $1,000 in sales, 28.72% food cost, even though it's made up of all these different things. And please don't point out any math errors because I threw this together real quick the other day. So you see that, everything, all those different food costs, 15%, 20, 35, 40, 10, 35, 15. At the end of the column there, it's 28% food cost. So I'm almost where I want to be. All those different things, I plug it in there and I go, you know what? At the rate that everybody is buying all of my stuff and that all these different offerings I have, I'm almost at my target. So now I would come back in here and I would say, I get my mouse here. What happens if I raise the price of this 16-inch mega meat? Or what happens if I take the chef salad off the menu and replace it with a different salad that instead of being 40% food cost is maybe 30% food cost? And it allows you to then change things around, play with things until you finally get to where you want your target to be. And you're like, oh, now I'm here. Now I'm getting what I need to be on my menu. So all of these things help you figure out that hard question of what do I price my things at? You've taken what your competitors are doing, you're looking at that, traditionally accepted price ranges. You're only going to be able to sell this water for maybe a couple bucks tops. 20-ounce of Coke is going to be maybe a couple bucks. A bottle of Bud Light is going to be $2 to $3. A draft beer. You've got all these things that are traditionally accepted. Wings, people aren't going to pay over a certain amount. And we can thank the chains for a lot of those boundaries that are out there too, because they have turned pizza into a commodity. A lot of people think if you're picking up a pizza, it needs to be $5. If you're having it delivered, it needs to be $10. And so a lot of things have been turned into commodities, and those traditionally accepted price ranges are there, and preconceived notions of what things need to be. But that's how you get, start fleshing that menu out. Like I said, just grab my card and I'll send you a copy of that spreadsheet. So some best practices. Even with what I've said, most pizzerias have a food cost price range of 20 to 35%. Way back when I got started, 20% food cost was unheard of. It's like, holy cow, 20%? Are you serious? I mean, I was doing 35% food cost, but my labor was like 15. It's back when minimum wage was $3.85 in Ohio, and people were a lot different back then. And but now things are like kind of flipped. Like labor is like really high now, and then food cost is, in order to get that prime cost to balance out, something's got to give. So food costs, people are charging more for their pizzas to make up for the labor. So big sellers and primary menu items need to be at or below your food cost goal, and preferably below. So if you are selling pizza, and let's say it's maybe 75 to 80% of your menu, it's your biggest selling thing, and you want to hit 28% food cost, well, that pizza better be 28% and preferably a lot lower, like down to around 20%. All right. Appetizers and add-ons should be like breadsticks, garlic knots should be well below your food cost goals. You need those on there to bring your average down. Those things need to be down in that 10 to 15% food cost. Putting things on your menu that are apples to oranges. I can't remember what book I read this in. I think it was Positively Outrageous Service, which is a great book. It's an old book, but it's a really good book. It's either that or Raving Fans. But there was this was back when Walmart was getting really, really big. It was just when they were exploding. And, when when Walmart comes into your community, a lot of times they kill the small family-owned businesses. And well, there was this hardware store that said, we're not going to get crushed by Walmart. So they just totally revamped their entire business. They invested tons of money in training, and they made everything really friendly, and they went over the top. So when you walked into this local hardware store, you were blown away at how awesome it was. Now, they were more expensive because they couldn't compete with Walmart. But one of the things they did was they made sure what they carried on their shelves wasn't exactly the same as what you could get at Walmart. So if you went in to get, let's say, a bottle of lawn fertilizer, or maybe weed killer. Well, they had the same kind. Let's say you're wanting to get some Roundup, okay? Roundup, they sold at Walmart for $15 for a 20-ounce bottle. I'm just making this up. But over here, it wasn't a 20-ounce bottle. It was like an 18.5-ounce bottle or something. They made sure everything they carried wasn't able to be an apples to apples comparison. So there was no able to put things right next to each other, because you're in the middle of Walmart and you're like, oh, I got to grab some of this and some of that. And you're like, well, how much is it over at this place? And you're like, oh, they're two different prices. They're two different containers, and nobody really wants to do the math of figuring out what the ounce per ounce is. And so they just go, you know what, the other place is a lot easier, and I'll just go there and I'll buy that. So they made sure they weren't selling things head on. And it's always good to make sure, if your menu looks identical to your competitors, well, then they're going to just line it right up and say, large pepperoni pizza 14-inch at Bob's Pizza is the same as a 14-inch pizza at, like, say, Domino's. And they're going to look at the prices, and they're going to be like, holy cow, this one is a lot more. Like one of the things, like where I'm at, nobody sells garlic knots. Nobody sells garlic knots. I'm the only one that sells garlic knots, or used to sell. Everybody just sells breadsticks. So we made garlic knots. And there was no price. There was no way to compare. Nobody knew what the going price for garlic knots were. So we jacked that thing up as high as we could, and we cranked out the garlic knots and made a ton of money on them. And then, whenever you get that whenever you look at, you want to add a new menu item to your menu, never bring something in that's higher than your food cost goal. I mean, it's just kind of one of those fast, hard rules that I always used was, if my sales rep comes in and goes, oh man, you need to add this to the menu, or I see something at the pizza show, I'm like, oh gosh, I got to add that pizza on. But, that winning pizza that won the International Pizza Challenge is amazing. It looks great. I need to add this. But my gosh, it's so expensive. It's going to be 42% food cost. But I need to add it because I want it. Man, just don't do it. Because you've got a food cost goal of 28% and you add that pizza in at 42% and people start loving it, well, they're going to stop buying your other stuff and start buying that. And all of a sudden now you're at 32% food cost. So you have to be real careful about adding things in. Never add an inventory item that's just, that you can't use in at least two places, to preserve waste. And And if you do have a menu item that's high labor or high food cost, if you go down that route, make sure it can be offset because it's extremely low labor cost. An example is desserts. That's one of the areas that I just didn't want to mess with desserts. I didn't want to really take time to deal with them. So we had a local baker made cookies for us and individually wrapped them. We put a display on the counter and we served those cookies. They made special ones just for us that we served to the customers. And it was easy because they were like $1.99 or big giant cookies. They were great. But they cost me like $1.25 each. So food cost was over 50%, but there was nothing. She came in, she stocked them, and then she left. We paid her. And then when a customer wanted it, I grabbed it and gave it to them. There was absolutely no work involved in it. So if you do have those things that are going to be high food cost, definitely make sure they're extremely low labor. The last thing you want is something on your menu that takes all day to prepare. You got to prep it like 6 days in a row, and you got to love it and feed it and pat it and hug it and all that stuff. And then you got all this work that goes into it, and it's 50% food cost. Now you're just going in the hole. So here's kind of what my menu broke down to at our place 600. And like I said, we had that food cost goal around 28%. So we made sure the bulk of our menu was well under that 28%. So cinnamon knots are at 4%. Garlic knots, our garlic knots, we sold at about 8%. Garden salads were 14%. Fountain drinks were 15%. Our build your own pizzas were at 15%. Specialty pizzas were between 15 and 25. Calzones were 15. Draft beer was 20 to 25, and actually some of them, the craft beers, were way up in the 30s. We did a pepperoni roll, which was 21. Mozzarella breadsticks 22. Meatballs 27. So on and so forth. But 83% of our menu was made up of things that were at or well below our food cost goal. So then when the other 17% of our menu balanced it out and got us to our goal. And then plus factoring in, we allowed for 1% waste on our food cost. Okay. Let me make sure I'm getting in the right spot. So then let's talk about raising prices. How often do you guys raise prices? Just shout some things out. Once a year? Twice a year? Anybody more often than twice a year? How often? Okay, because you're a food truck, yeah. Nobody knows what your prices are because you're going all over the place. So you're just like, yeah, let's soak these guys for as much as we can get, right? Yeah. Anybody do it more or less often than once a year? Never have. Oh man. Okay. So people sometimes, I know I always felt a sense of guilt when I raised my prices. I always did. I just felt bad. It's like I felt like I was doing something wrong. And I always tried to push it off as long as I could, way back in the beginning. I was like, man, I loved my customers. I was small. I just felt bad. I'm like, I'm going to have to ask these guys for another quarter, another 50 cents, another buck. And I'm like, man, I feel bad for doing this. But, it's not because I'm greedy. It's because, there's inflation. There's rising costs. I got to make profit. I got a family to feed. I've got employees that need paid. I've got an uncle, Sam, that needs about 33% of what I make. So I gotta support him too. So I've got all of these things that are just bearing down on me. And, and every year that profit margin that I showed, that 20%, if you don't raise your prices, it just keeps shrinking and shrinking and shrinking and shrinking and shrinking until one day you're like, why am I even doing this? Why am I even here? The average profit margin, I'm talking about 20%. The average profit margin in our industry is around 6 to 7%. So that means in the average independent pizzeria makes around $400,000 to $500,000 a year, which is about $28,000 a year is what the average pizzeria owner takes home. And in the poverty line for a family of four is about $25,000. So, and that's the federal. So we're real close to all being just on welfare. So, it's like, you might as well just go ahead and just sign up. But, you got to do it. Inflation just keeps coming. Inflation, who lives in Illinois? Yeah, congratulations. $15 an hour. Yeah. Yeah. So, Ohio, where I'm from, they passed what they did is they tied the minimum wage to the consumer price index. I know a lot of states are doing this. So as every year when the price index goes up, then so does our minimum wage. So if it goes up 2%, then the minimum wage there's a correlation, it goes up too. So then automatically, what do I need to do? I need to go up right along with it to make sure I'm paying for that. So minimum wage goes up, the government's making sure everybody in Ohio is getting their, inflation taken care of. Well, then I got to take care of me and mine too. And then you've got everything. Everything goes up. So what are some things I want to talk about? I lost my train of thought. If you're not increasing, I talked about if you're not increasing your prices at least at the rate of inflation, you're going backwards. And 2018, 12-month period ending in 2018, the government puts it together for us. They said inflation was 2.1%. So in that period, if you didn't at the end of that period, if you weren't raising your prices by 2.1%, you were going backwards. You're losing profit. Okay. So what are some best practices on, what are my thoughts on best practices on raising prices? Again, make sure, can you really command those prices you're asking for? Because our customers aren't always understanding. We're like, inflation, we need to raise prices. Minimum wage went up, we need to raise prices. They're like, I don't care. I don't care. Maybe they didn't get a raise this year, and they're suffering too. They don't care. So make sure everything, again, in your business is clicking along. You're delivering both quality and you're delivering service. Bite the bullet, it's a business. Grow a spine. You just, for me, I felt bad. I grew a spine. I'm just like, you know what? I don't care. I don't care anymore. I actually had a lady break down in the front of my pizzeria in tears one day because we raised the price. When minimum wage in Ohio went from like $4.50 to like $6.25, like overnight, something like that, when that law kicked in, I had to raise the prices across the board, $1 a pizza. And so her normal every Friday night 2 large pizzas was now $2 more. Man, she just, she was having a bad day, obviously. I don't think it was that crushing, but $2. $2 more, and then that was it. That was her breaking point. She never came back, but you know what? I had to grow a spine. I needed thicker skin because I had to do it, And if questions, I'll take at the end. So save your questions, and we'll hear in about 10 minutes. We'll go to questions, and I'll stick around too. So make sure you got some thick skin, and have a method to the madness. So just don't willy-nilly raise prices. You come back to this that spreadsheet I showed. What I always did is, let me bring that up. I would plug in what I was thinking about price increases. Okay, so I'm thinking I've got to make up 3%, which 3% of $1 million. I can't do math. $3,000? That's not much. 30. Okay, yeah. It's a long day and it's in Las Vegas. I'm not really that stupid. So 30 grand. I need to make up 30 grand. All right, so that's about $3,000 a month, a little less, maybe $2,800 a month. So I got to come up with $2,800. All right, how do I get it? How do I get $2,800 more out of this menu without totally infuriating my entire customer base? So you go in here and you're like, okay, what's my selling price? I need to raise it a quarter here, 10 cents there, 50 cents here, $1 there, until I get my $3,000 or my $2,800. I'm all good. Now I know what I need to do. I figured out what I needed to raise my prices, and I did it. That's what I need to do. So you have to have some reasoning behind it. And I always like to do, on top of that, there were some methods I used to make it a little easier so the customers didn't quite catch up with it. We'll talk about that. The alternate increases. What I did with pizzas is we did what I called we'd alternate between base and topping prices. So we'd go back and forth. The base price of a large pizza would go up 10 cents, and then 6 months later, we talk about have a plan or scheduled. I would do it every 6 months automatically. I don't care if I had 10,000 menus that are printed and ready to go. They went in the dumpster, and here's my new ones. Every 6 months, like clockwork, every 6 months. And I would alternate. Base price would go up maybe 10 cents or 25 cents, and then the next time it would be the topping price would go up maybe a nickel, or maybe it would go up 10 cents or whatever it was. And I would just keep alternating them back and forth. And so the customers, part of it is prices are always moving. And so the customers are like, never can quite memorize my prices. They're always kind of a little bit different. And so, you know, the worst thing you can do is wait like 2 or 3 years and all of your customers have your prices memorized. So when they call and they're like, and it changes, then it's like, whoa, what just happened? You know, I'm like, it's been, you know, $19.95 for 2 large pizzas on Friday night for the last 12 years. What do you mean you want $20.15 now? You know, so if you alternate and you keep them moving and have that method where things aren't always, you know, it's always a shift back and forth, helps kind of lessen the blow and people don't quite pick up on it as much. Now, there's always those times when you go over that dollar hump that you're just going to freak everybody out. When you go from $3.99 to $4.05, it's the end of the world, man. I mean, they're like, I'm not buying that from you ever again. I can't do it. I'm not going to be able to pay my mortgage now. And you sob story. And like, you know, so whenever, just be ready. When you go over that hump, make sure that you're ready for it. You know, and make sure your employees, you know, be prepared to explain. Make sure your staff can answer why. Why did your prices go up? Well, you know what? You know, we have to keep up with inflation. Whatever your story wants to be, you know, I mean, maybe make a bunch of junk up. It doesn't really matter, but make sure everybody's on the same page. Have a staff meeting, pull everybody in and say, listen, guys, you know, I want to be able to pay you what you're worth. So in order to do that, I've got to raise prices. And people are going to be upset. So we need to be prepared to explain it. We need to soften the blow. I want you guys to all be on the same page. We're going to talk about the minimum wage increase went in. Maybe the price of cheese just jumped. You know, maybe it's this, maybe whatever. So have a story ready. And, you know, the customer may not get it right there and then, and they'll be just like, I don't care. But, you know, 2 or 3 days later, it may be, you know, they open up the newspaper and they see the story about $15 minimum wage in New York and Illinois is killing everybody, or, you know, the inflation is going up, and they see that and they go, you know what, it makes sense now, and then they'll come back in 2 weeks. So, but just be ready, be prepared, like making scripts for the employees. And then here's just some common mistakes. You know, talked about failing to cost everything out. Got to know what everything costs. Not having a food cost goal. I know I keep repeating that, but that's super important to know what your food cost goal is in order to set your prices. Basing your prices on your competitors' prices. Basing menu items on personal likes. This was a hard one for me because I don't like a lot of things. And so what I put on my menu way back in the beginning was what I liked. And since I have a pretty narrow vision of what I like, I was losing a lot of people. So there were some pizzas. My number one selling pizza was ranch, bacon, chicken, and kettle cooked potato chips. Number one selling pizza. I hate ranch. I've never eaten that pizza ever. And it was our number one selling pizza. So sometimes you've got to make sure you're not just zeroing in only on the things you like. There's a lot of things on my menu that I didn't like and I've never eaten, but they made me a lot of money. Hey, I repeated that one twice, didn't I? Basing menu items. No, that's menu items on your competitors' menus. So so you're thinking about, well, what do I want to add to the menu? So you go and get all your competitors' menus, you open them up and go, oh man, they sell fries and they sell burgers. I need to add that. No, don't add that because they're making a big mistake. Don't do that. Don't put their stuff on your menu just because they're doing it. All right. Don't try to compete head-to-head with competitors. I talked about that. Make sure you understand the impact of everything you put on your menu. If you're thinking about adding a menu item, have that matrix that I showed up there. Have it. Plug that new menu item in and estimate how many you think you'll sell and see what the impact is. Oops. You know, and I talked about focusing solely on food cost. Well, you also need to pay attention to contribution. So sometimes, you know, if an 8-inch cheese pizza may have 15% food cost, and that 16-inch mega meat up there might be 30% food cost, but you could sell half as many of that 16-inch and make more money than selling double the number of 8-inch ones, because every time you sell one of those 16-inch, you're putting maybe $15 in the bank, $15 versus the $2.50 for every 8-inch pizza. So look at the contribution too. Not raising prices frequently enough, not strategically increasing prices, like I mentioned. and allowing the menu to become stagnant. Don't always add new things to the menu. Always be changing it. This is the place to get ideas. And sticking to mistakes because you fear change, or sticking mistakes because you spent so long making them. You know what? I haven't raised prices, and I'm sorry for that person that said that. I'm not beating up on you, but you ever raised prices? Man, don't stick with it because you've spent so long not raising prices and you're afraid to raise prices. Just do it. You always got to keep things changing. I made a lot of mistakes over the years, lots and lots and lots of mistakes. And luckily, I did it back in the 90s when things were a lot different than they are today. The cost of doing business is a lot more expensive today than it was back then. So I was able to recover from a lot of my mistakes that today would be a lot harder to recover from. And trying to be everything to everyone. If you try and be everything to everyone, and you've got a menu that's pizza and pasta and spaghetti and lasagna and burgers and fries and onion rings and tacos, you end up being nothing. Nothing stands out on your menu. You have nothing that stands out, so you end up being nothing to no one. So, questions? What do you got back there? You had the question. And as loud as you can so everybody can hear it. And I'll try and repeat it too. Okay.
You mentioned that raising your prices with inflation.
Yes.
So say inflation last year was 2.1%. And do you add that on top of your food cost inflation or increase as well? So say the vendors are not charging you 3% more for your food, are you now going to be raising your prices 5.1?
It's kind of like, you got to look at everything. That's the kind of the short answer. You got to look at everything and say, you know what? I mean, the 2.1 is a good indicator of what you should be thinking. You should be increasing everything. But if there's some easy to spot things where you look at your prices and go, you know what? Cheese is up $10,000. I need to come up with an extra $10,000. Go ahead and just do whatever you need to do to cover whatever prices and costs went up. Do whatever you need to do to cover them. So whether it's, yeah. So if you're not sure, I mean, the inflation, the whatever inflation was is a good, if you're not sure what to do, that's a good number to look at. But ideally, you should be really analyzing everything and looking at what you bought and how much it cost and the price of all this stuff and go, you know what, I really need to come up with this much money. So, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, when it comes to the menu not being stagnant, do I just keep adding or do I take things off? Take things off is what I always do. I mean, it depends on your concept. So if you've got a big menu, and you want a big menu, I mean, I don't like big menus, but what I would do is if something new was coming on, unless it was something really spectacular, and I'm like, I've got to add this no matter what, and there was nothing else that I really wanted to get rid of, I always, when I added something, I took something off. I always looked to say, what am I not selling? What's not? I always looked at it, analyzed everything and said, you know what, I only sold 12 of these last month, yank it, and then add the new item is what I did. So, yeah, I've only got so much room on the menu. I put one thing on, something falls off. So, any other questions? Yeah. How do you add your labor cost and fixed cost on every dish? Oh man, that's hard. Yeah, I don't know. How do I factor in the fixed cost and labor cost on every dish? You add the monthly fixed cost divided by it. I've never done that, to be honest. Factored in what it is for every single item I sell on the menu. I mean, that's a good idea. How it. Well, thank you. Thanks. I mean, I looked at the whole picture, the whole entire picture and said, you know what, fixed costs for the year are this, profit is this, food, labor is this. I looked at the big picture and I never really analyzed it by the dish. I mean, man, that sounds like a lot of work. So, yep, back there. Yep. Yeah, so seasonal fluctuations. So what do you do? Yeah, when tomatoes jump or cheese jumps, cheese always jumps. You know, when I build my menu, build everything is I always look at, you know, some of those things we know are going to ebb and flow. Cheese is going to go up and cheese is going to come down, you know, and all the other different markets move back and forth. And there's some things we know will happen. So instead of pricing my menu with say I'm going to do, when I'm pricing things out, like we showed that the large pizza, instead of using the lowest price of cheese or the cheese price I'm using right now, I look at what could cheese get, or what does the average cost of cheese usually end up being for the year, and base it on that rather than when cheese market is at support price. But then there's those things like when there's, you know, when what romaine lettuce, that got real expensive. I kept eating it anyway. I didn't care. I mean, we had a bunch in the refrigerator. I'm like, I'm going to toughen up. But I mean, sometimes it's like it's customers will kind of understand if you put some temporary price increases in effect, but a lot of them don't. And they're just like, you know what, this guy's really nitpicking me. You know, and sometimes they just don't care. Now, so if tomatoes jump and it costs you an extra $2,000 for tomatoes for a month, well, just eat it. That's what I did. I just ate it and said, you know what, I'm doing a favor to my customer base. I don't want to upset them. So I'm just going to eat that and just not worry about it. I'm not going to nitpick them. But if tomatoes jumped and never came back down, all right, now it's time to do it, you know, so that's what we did. So, any other quick questions? Yep.
Is there a way to push or force, or a better way to push or force intuitive on the dining customers?
So the question is there a way to force customers to pay a tip?
That I can add
Oh man, only if you want to be hated by your customers, I say. You know, the short answer to that is I would never do that. I would just make sure your staff is doing an awesome job and making sure that when they do serve a table, that table wants to tip them. You know, that's the thing, is I'm not a big tipper. I never have been a big tipper. So when I go to eat somewhere, if somebody better do a really good job for me to really tip much. I don't stiff them, but I'm just like, you know, and so when I go eat out and the server does an amazing job, I go way above and beyond. I mean, I gave a 50% tip not too long ago because I was blown away, because they really made me feel welcome, and they really made me feel like they're doing me a favor. And I was like, they made everything for my family amazing. But you go in the next time and they're just like, yeah, what do you want? Here it is, get out, eat, whatever. I was like, and you want me to tip you? I mean, I'd rather would have went to, can I just go in the back and get it myself? I mean, all you did was bring me refills. The machine's right there. I could have got them, you know? So I focus a little more, I think, on making your customers automatically want to tip because your servers are doing a great job. So that'd be my answer. Yeah.
Our last menu increase, we trained our staff to communicate that we raise our prices to increase, to keep up with X amount of inflation. In your experience, have you seen something that has worked for your communication with your staff, where it was effective, that they were indeed relaying that message out on the floor?
So you said your last price increase, you communicated to your staff that you were doing it because of inflation, and then they turned around and told that to the customers too. I mean, we just did the same thing. I mean, we just would bring the staff in and go, listen, the price of just everything is going up. We've got to raise it. We would just give them a speech and just keep it simple and write it on a little piece of paper for them to see it on the bulletin board. We kept it pretty simple. You know, no customers don't want to hear a big long story on the phone or when they're there. So we just kept it simple, and we never really got too far into it. We're like, you know, minimum wage went up. There's a crisis in the cheese market. You know, whatever, because, you know, there was one time cheese seemed to almost, this way back, probably 10 years ago, cheese jumped like $1 a pound overnight and stayed there for like months. And then we had to raise prices at that. But we never really overthought it. We kept it simple and short, sweet, because most of the time the customers they're going to only listen to a short amount and then shut down. So I don't know if that helps or not.
I have one other question.
Sure.
When you increase your prices and you lost some of your regulars, or you mentioned that later,
Mm-hmm.
that you lost over a $2 increase, did your staff take it negatively? Did you have to course correct them at all?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so his question is that when we raised our prices and we lost customers, because you will lose customers, did the staff take it negatively, right? Yeah, the staff got, almost all of them came back. Almost all of those customers eventually came back when we still made sure that we were just nailing it. We were awesome, great pizza, great service. And when they went over to the competitors and realized that how bad they sucked, they came back eventually, So, but then the employees, they're freaking out. They're like, we're losing sales. I don't have as many deliveries. I don't have as many tables. They're like, this is going to hurt my income. This hurt my job. So they, we had to coach them and say, listen, they'll come back. It's all right. We never really suffered any massive drops. But even if we did see it, we didn't take it out on the employees. So we tried to make sure they still got their hours, and we didn't say, oh man, we were like, we're down tonight. You guys all have to go home. And then it just creates this downward spiral and they start looking for another job. But we never had it impact us that bad, but we just always kept it positive and made sure they understand. We told them what would happen. They'll leave and then they'll come back. When we implemented delivery charge, when I think back to that, when we implemented our delivery charge, we went from free delivery to $1 delivery. People freaked out. It was the end of the world, man. Customers, our deliveries were like it just came to, just crashed. But then it very slowly came back. And then we added, so we're adding $1 delivery charge. And then the drivers then got a little bit more. So instead of getting 20 cents a mile, maybe they get 25 now. I can't remember exactly what we did at that point, but we made sure they got a little bit more and we made sure we kept their hours up and until it came back. So yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, to be prepared for your employees to freak out a little bit. So I'll take a couple more and then we'll wrap it up, and I'll be up here afterwards too. Yeah.
My question was on delivery fees. What are your thoughts on that? Is that a situation where you kind of make the prices on your competitor?
On delivery charges, or delivery charges. Yeah, I think it's important with delivery charges to keep it in the same ballpark, because it's but at the same time you got to make sure. And if everybody's charging 50 cents for delivery, and you really need to be charging $1.50, well then charge the $1.50, because you got to look at it realistically and say, are these guys way off? If everybody else is charging $4, are they abusing the customer? Can I get away with just charging $2? Yeah. But thank you guys for listening. I'll stick around up here. Just come on if you have any questions. I appreciate it, and hope the rest of the show is great for you. Thank you.